Hello, friends. We are very interested to know which cities you are listening to us from, so quickly like and write in the comments where you are from. Also, share what shocking stories happened in your city or maybe even with you personally. Subscribe because the next story could be about your city or even your personal drama. Now let's dive into a new exciting story. John McCain stood on the platform of a small train station in Ohio, clutching a worn military bag. The train that had brought him here from Fort Bragg was already leaving behind a cloud of steam and a sharp whistle that made John's fingers tremble. He clenched his teeth, forcing himself not to flinch. 3 years in Afghanistan taught him to keep his face, but his body still remembered every explosion, every cry. He was 28, but he felt like he was 50. John, Emily's voice cut through the noise of the station, soft but insistent, like the ringing of a bell on a windy day. He turned his head and saw her, a thin figure in a blue dress, with flowing brown hair that the wind fluttered like a flag. She ran towards him, smiling so widely that her eyes turned into narrow slits. John dropped his bag and stepped towards him, feeling something warm spreading in his chest, drowning out the echo of the war. "Lord, you're home," Emily breathed, throwing herself on his neck. Her arms wrapped around him, and he inhaled the scent of her perfume, something floral, familiar from school. "I thought this day would never come." "Me too," John muttered, hugging her close. His voice was hoarse, as if he had not spoken for months. "Are you real?" She pulled away, looking at him with mock indignation. "What do you think? I stood here for 3 hours while your train was late. Almost froze, by the way." John smiled for the first time in a long time. "Sorry." "Well, now you're mine," she said, poking him in the chest with her finger. "And I won't let you go anywhere, do you hear?" He nodded, although deep down he knew that part of him remained there in the sand, among the shots and dust. But Emily didn't need to know that. Not now. They walked to her car, parked at the station. Emily chattered on and on, talking about how her little brother had broken his arm falling off his bike, and how their neighbor, Mrs. Clare, had caught a raccoon in her chicken coop again. John listened, nodding in the right places, but his eyes kept catching on little things: a crack in the asphalt, rust on a lamppost, a dog barking too loudly in the distance. Everything seemed too peaceful, too alien. "Are you okay?" Emily stopped at the car, looking at him with slight concern. "Yes," he lied, opening the door. "I'm just tired. The road is long." She frowned, but didn't argue. "Then let's go home. I made your favorite apple pie." "Well, I almost did. The dough is ready, and I'll finish the rest while you get some sleep." "You don't have to," John said, getting into the passenger seat. "I have to," she snapped, starting the engine. "You've been eating this army soup for 3 years. I won't let you go back to normal life without proper food." He grinned, looking out the window. The trees flashed past, green and calm, so different from the scorched wastelands that he had left across the ocean. Emily's house, now their home, was small, one story. John remembered him from when he and Emily dated in high school. Then he would come here with flowers stolen from Mrs. Clare's garden, and they would kiss on this very porch until her father turned on the light to shoo him away. "Well, how do you like it?" Emily asked as she opened the door. "I cleaned up a little. I even hung new curtains." John stepped inside. The living room smelled of lavender and fresh paint. There was a stack of pillows on the couch and a photo of him and Emily at prom, both in ridiculous robes, laughing on the wall. "Looks like a house," he said, placing the bag on the threshold. "This is the house, stupid." She poked him in the side with her elbow. "Our house. Now it's official." He nodded, but the words were stuck in his throat. House. The word sounded so simple, but for him it was like a mirage, close, but unattainable. "I'll go take a shower," he said, picking up his bag. "And then I'll try your pie." "Just don't fall asleep there," she shouted after him. "I'm not going to drag you out of the bathroom." The water flowed hot, washing away dust and fatigue. John stood under the shower, closing his eyes, and tried not to think about how easily everything could have ended differently. One wrong step on patrol, one mine under his feet, and he wouldn't be standing here, wouldn't hear Emily humming something in the kitchen. He turned off the water and looked at himself in the foggy mirror. The face was thin, with dark circles under the eyes, and the scar above the eyebrow, a memory of shrapnel, seemed brighter than before. "John, are you alive?" Emily's voice came from behind the door. "Almost," he responded, pulling on a clean t-shirt. "I'm already on my way." He walked into the kitchen where Emily was rolling out dough while humming the old Sweet Caroline song. "Help?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "You? In the kitchen?" She laughed. "No, sit down and watch. This is my gift to you." He sat down at the table, watching her deftly shape the pie. "You know," he said quietly, "I missed this. For you." Emily froze, looking at him. Her eyes sparkled, but she quickly turned away, hiding her tears. "Me too," she said, sniffling. "Every day, I wrote letters to you even when I knew you wouldn't answer." "I received them," he admitted. "I just didn't know what to say." Where I was, the words seemed empty. She nodded without looking at him. "Now you are here, and I don't need words, I need you." John stood up and walked over to her, hugging her from behind. She smelled like home, and for the first time in 3 years, he felt good. At night, he lay in their new bedroom, listening to Emily's breathing. She fell asleep, almost immediately clinging to him, and he looked at the ceiling, counting the cracks. A car honked outside the window, and he tensed, expecting an explosion that did not happen. His heart was pounding, but he forced himself to breathe deeply. "Are you okay?" Emily's sleepy voice broke the silence. "Yes," he lied again. "Sleep." She muttered something incomprehensible and buried her nose in his shoulder. John closed his eyes, trying to believe that the war was behind him. John McCain stood in front of the mirror in a small room at the church, looking at his reflection with a smile that he could not contain. The black suit Emily had chosen for him fit perfectly, emphasizing his broad shoulders, and the tie, a deep blue like her eyes, added something personal theirs. Outside the window, the rain was pouring, heavy and warm, beating on the roof like drums heralding the beginning of a new life. He was 28, and in half an hour he would become the husband of the woman who had been waiting for him all these years. This thought made my heart beat faster, but not from nerves, from happiness. "Well, are you ready?" Mark, his best friend, entered the room, slamming the door so that it creaked. His blonde hair was slightly disheveled, and his smile stretched from ear to ear. "Or should I push you to the altar?" John laughed, turning to him. "Try it, and I'll kill you with one blow." "Oh, what a brave groom!" Mark came closer, straightening his own tie. "But seriously, you look like someone who won the lottery. Emily made you look handsome." "She's the beauty," John said, looking in the mirror. "I'm just trying not to ruin the picture for her." Mark slapped him on the back. "You won't spoil it. She waited for you for 3 years while you swallowed dust there. Today is your day, brother. Enjoy." John nodded, feeling warmth in his chest. Emily was his beacon. Her letters arrived every week, full of love and stories about home. She wrote about how she baked pies, how her dog chased the neighbor's cats, how she dreamed of the day when he would return. And here he was, ready to say, "I do" to her in front of everyone who knew them. "Let's go," he said, straightening his shoulders. "I don't want her to wait an extra second." The church was old, with walls darkened by time and stained glass windows that let in soft light, even on a rainy day. The inside smelled of flowers, daisies, and lilies, which Emily herself had chosen for decorations. There were few guests, her family, a few friends from school, a couple of John's colleagues who were able to come. But it didn't matter to John. The whole world now came down to her. He stood at the altar, next to Markham, who kept winking at him like a boy at a school party. The pastor, Mr. Hill, with a good-natured smile and thick gray eyebrows, was turning over the pages of the Bible, humming something under his breath. "Are you ready to tell her your vows?" Mark whispered. "It took me 3 years to come up with them," John answered, not taking his eyes off the doors at the end of the hall. "If I forget, just kick me." Mark chuckled, but then the doors opened and John's breathing stopped. Emily appeared in the doorway, holding the hand of her father, Tom. Her dress was white as a cloud, with long lace sleeves, which she herself finished at night while John was in the army. Her hair, brown and shiny, was pulled back into a soft bun, and in her hands she held a bouquet of daisies, their flowers, as she always said. The rain left drops on her shoulders, and they sparkled like little stars. "Oh my God," Mark breathed. "She's like an angel." "She's better," John said quietly, feeling his eyes sting. Emily walked towards him. Her steps were light but confident. Tom whispered something to her, smiling, and she looked only at John. When she stopped next to him, he noticed how her fingers trembled around the bouquet. "Hello," she said, her voice soft as the rain outside the window. "Hi," he replied, smiling so widely that his cheeks hurt. You are beautiful." She laughed, tilting her head slightly. "And you are my hero, even in this suit." The pastor cleared his throat to get their attention. "Dear friends," he began, his voice booming like a bell, "we have gathered here to unite John and Emily in sacred union." John barely heard him. He looked at Emily, at her shining eyes, at a drop of rain rolling down her cheek. She squeezed his hand, and he returned it, feeling their fingers intertwined. The vows were their moment. John took the crumpled piece of paper out of his pocket, but, looking at Emily, threw it aside. "Emily," he began, his voice firm and full of love, "you were my light when I was in the dark. Every letter of yours, every call of yours is what kept me alive there. I have been waiting for this day for 3 years, dreaming about it, and now you are here in front of me. I promise to love you every day, to protect you, to hold your hand like this. You are my home, and I will never let you go." Her lips trembled, and she blinked away the tears. "John," she said, her voice trembling but full of strength, "you are my hero, my best friend, my love. I waited for you, wrote to you, prayed for you. You came back to me, and that's all I dreamed of. I promised to be with you, laugh with you, cry with you, build our life with you. You are my heart, and I am only yours forever." John swallowed the lump in his throat, feeling her words hug him. The pastor smiled as he closed the Bible. "I pronounce you husband and wife. John, kiss your bride." He leaned towards her, his hands cupping her face, and their lips met. She was warm, soft, and dear. The guests clapped, Mark whistled, and Emily laughed into the kiss, pressing herself against him. "I love you," he whispered, pulling away just enough to meet her eyes. "I love you too," she replied, beaming. The reception was held in the church basement, where the tables were laden with food: fried chicken, potato salad, apple and cherry pies, everything that Emily adored. The rain hammered on the windows, but inside it was warm from laughter and conversation. "Dance, dance," Emily's Aunt Marge shouted, waving her glass of lemonade. "Oh, come on," Emily tugged at John's hand, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "You won't refuse your wife, will you?" "Never," he said, standing up. "But if I step on your foot, don't complain." She laughed, dragging him to the center of the room. Someone turned on the tape recorder, and Unchained Melody started playing, their song that they listened to back in school. John put his arm around her waist, she put her hands on his shoulders, and they began to move, slowly but together. "You're not so bad," she said, looking up at him. "You make me better," he replied, pulling her closer. "I still don't believe that you're mine." "Get used to it," she smiled. "You have your whole life ahead of you to believe." He kissed her forehead, feeling her hair smell like daisies. The guests around were hooting, but for John they did not exist only her, only this moment. As the evening drew to a close, the rain subsided, leaving behind fresh air and wet streets. They sat on the porch of their house, Emily in his jacket, and John with a bottle of lemonade in his hand. The sky cleared, and the stars were breaking through the clouds. "It was the best day," she said, clinging to him. "Do you agree?" "Yes," he answered, stroking her hand, "because you are with me." She turned to him, her face glowing. "Are you happy?" "You couldn't be happier," he said, and it was the absolute truth. "You are everything I dreamed of, Emily." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "And you are everything I dreamed of. We did it, John. We are together." He hugged her, feeling her warmth, her breath. The rain left puddles on the road, and they reflected the stars like little promises. This day was their beginning, and he knew what was ahead. Only good things awaited them. At night they lay in bed, her head on his chest, and his hand in her hair. The rain had stopped long ago, and silence enveloped the house. Emily fell asleep, smiling in her sleep, and John looked at her, feeling his heart fill. It was their day, their wedding, their love, and they were ready for every day with her ahead. May 2009, Ohio. John sat in the hospital corridor, clutching a plastic cup of cold coffee. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and the silence around seemed alive. Only the hum of lamps and the occasional steps of nurses broke it. He was 29, and somewhere outside the maternity ward, Emily was now giving birth to their child. His child. This thought made him unable to sit still. He got up, walked along the wall, sat down again, nervously fiddling with the hem of his shirt. Mr. McCain, the nurse, a short woman with tired eyes, came out of the door. John jumped up, almost spilling his coffee. Yes, it's me. Is everything okay? Everything is fine. She smiled, and her face softened. Congratulations, you have a son. You can come in. He froze, the words stuck in his throat. Son. He has a son. John nodded, throwing the glass into the trash can, and followed her, feeling his legs shaking with excitement. The door opened, and he saw Emily. She lay on the hospital bed, her hair stuck to her forehead from sweat, but her face glowed. In her hands, she held a small bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. Emily looked up at John, and her smile widened. Come here, Daddy, she said, her voice hoarse but full of love. Look at him. John walked over, feeling his heart pounding in his throat. He leaned over the bed, and Emily carefully handed him the package. A small face, wrinkled and pink, peered out of the blanket. His eyes were closed, and his tiny fists were clenched, as if he was preparing to fight. Oh my God, John breathed, holding his son as carefully as if he were made of glass. He's real. Emily laughed, a weak but warm sound. Of course, it's real. I wore it for 9 months, so now you're surprised? John smiled, not taking his eyes off the baby. He's wonderful. How are you? She reached out her hand, touching his elbow. We did it, John. This is our boy. He nodded, feeling tears welling up in his eyes. He hadn't cried since childhood, but now he couldn't help it. It was too big, too real. His son, his family. What should we call it? He asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. Liam, Emily said without hesitation. As we decided. Liam John McCain. Liam, John repeated, looking at the baby. Hello, Liam. I'm your dad. The baby stirred, opening one eye, and John laughed, wiping his tears with his sleeve. Look, he's already listening to me. Of course. Emily moved closer, laying her head on his shoulder. They sat there for a few minutes, just looking at Liam. The nurse quietly left, leaving them alone. John couldn't stop looking at the tiny nose, the dark hair sticking out from under the blanket, the way Liam was breathing quietly and evenly. How are you? He asked, turning to Emily. Was it hard? She sighed, but the smile did not disappear. Hard is not the right word. 14 o'clock, John. I thought he decided to stay inside forever. But then I heard him cry, and everything became unimportant. You did great, he said, kissing her forehead. You are the strongest woman I know. And you are the best husband, she answered, looking at him with tenderness. I saw you running along the corridor. The poor nurses are probably tired of calming you down. John chuckled, shaking his head. I thought I was going crazy. I'm sitting there, and there's only one thing in my head, that everything will be fine with you. And here we are, she said, stroking Liam's cheek. All 3 of us. He nodded, feeling her words fill him. 3 of us. Family. What he dreamed about while he was in Afghanistan, reading her letters under the dim light of a lantern. Now it was reality. An hour later, Emily fell asleep, curled up on the bed. John sat next to him, holding Liam in his arms. The baby woke up and looked at him with one eye, as if studying him. John rocked him quietly, humming an old lullaby he heard his mother say as a child. "You're my boyfriend, right?" he whispered. "You and I will be best friends. We'll build cars, play ball, whatever you want." Liam yawned, closing his eyes, and John smiled. "Tired? Well, rest. We have our whole lives ahead of us." He placed his son in the plastic crib next to Emily, but couldn't move away. He stood and watched them sleep, his wife and his son. This was more than he could have imagined, more than he deserved. But it was his. In the morning, Mark came into the ward carrying a huge bouquet of daisies and a box of donuts. His shirt was wrinkled and his eyes were red. He clearly hadn't slept since yesterday's shift at the factory. "Well, Dad," he said, putting the bouquet on the table, "how is the new McCain doing?" John smiled, pointing to the crib. "Here it is, Liam. See for yourself." Mark leaned over the crib, whistling. "Damn, he's all about you." The same serious look. "Emily, are you sure this is yours?" Emily, awakened by his voice, laughed. "I'm sure, Mark. But if he inherited your appetite, I'm in trouble." "Hey, I brought donuts." Mark picked up the box. "This is for you, heroine. And for you, John, so that you don't starve while you wait." John took the donut, taking a bite. "Thank you, brother. You're on time." "Always on time," Mark winked, sitting down on a chair. "So, tell me, how did it go?" Emily looked at John, her eyes shining. "It was long, but perfect. John almost punched a hole in the hallway floor, but we made it through." "I just wanted to be close," John said, shrugging. "And she did all the work." "We did," Emily corrected, taking his hand. "Together." Mark nodded, looking at them with a smile. "You two are something, and this baby is lucky to be born to you." Emily's parents, Tom and Linda, arrived in the afternoon. Tom, a strong man with a gray mustache, hugged John so tightly that he almost suffocated. "Congratulations, son," he said, clapping him on the back. "You are a father now. It's a great honor." "Thank you, Tom," John replied, feeling warm from his words. "I will try not to let you down." Linda, a small woman with kind eyes, immediately rushed to the crib. "Oh, how beautiful he is. Emily, he looks like you as a child. The same cheeks." "Mom, he was just born," Emily laughed. "Give him a couple of days so we can figure out who he looks like." "No, he's already McCain," John said, looking at Liam. "Look how stubborn his chin is." Everyone laughed, and the chamber was filled with voices. Linda pulled out the knitted booties she made herself, and Tom talked about how he went fishing last week. John looked at them, at Emily, at Liam, and felt that this was his place here with them. By evening, they were left alone. Emily nursed Liam, humming softly, while John sat next to her, holding her hand. The sun was setting outside the window, turning the sky pink and gold. "Are you happy?" she asked, looking at him. "More than I can say," he replied, squeezing her fingers. "You gave it to me. You gave me everything." She smiled, her eyes sparkling. "And you gave me a family, John. I always knew it would be like this with you." He leaned down, kissing her temple. "We'll be better parents, right?" "The best," she said, looking at Liam. "For him." Liam finished eating, and Emily handed it to John. He took his son, feeling him warmth, its tiny weight. "I love you," he said, looking at them both, "more than anything else." "And we you," Emily answered, laying her head on his shoulder. July 2012, Ohio. John woke up to the sound of children's laughter coming from the kitchen. The sun filtered through the curtains, drawing streaks of gold across the wooden floor of their bedroom. He was 32, and every morning for the last 3 years had begun the same way with the voice of Liam, who now, at 3 years old, had turned into a little hurricane of energy. John smiled, rubbing his eyes, and turned to Emily. She was still sleeping, her brown hair scattered across the pillow, and her face was calm, like a lake on a windless day. "Dad." Liam flew into the room, jumping onto the bed with such force that Emily jumped. "Oh, Liam," she muttered, opening one eye. "Have you decided to wake us up before the roosters?" The baby with dark curls and Emily's eyes laughed, poking John in the chest with his finger. Dad, get up. You promised a lake. John caught his small hands, pulling him towards him. He promised, right? Well, then I'll have to get up, since you're my boss. I'm the boss. Liam puffed out his chest proudly, and Emily laughed, sitting up in bed. Then tell Daddy to make me coffee, boss, she said, winking at John. He stood up, scooping Liam into his arms. Let's go, General. Let's make Mom some coffee, and then we'll go to the lake. The last 3 years have been the best of John's life. After Liam was born in May 2009, their small home in Ohio became a real hotbed. Emily quit her job at the local library to be with her son, and John took a job as a mechanic in a workshop on the outskirts of the city. The work was simple, fixing tractors, trucks, sometimes motorcycles, but it provided the stability he craved after the army. Every morning he left with a thermos of coffee that Emily had prepared the night before and returned to her smile and Liam's cries, "Daddy's home." Liam grew up quickly. By the age of 1, he was already walking, clinging to furniture. By 2, he was chatting incessantly, repeating everything he heard. By the age of 3, he had become a little explorer. He caught bugs in the yard, built towers from cubes, which he immediately destroyed with a loud boom. John adored him. He spent every free minute with his son. He taught him to ride a tricycle, made wooden cars, and read him fairy tales before bed. Emily joked that they were like two boys, only one was older. "You're spoiling him," she said one day when John brought Liam a toy tractor that he had assembled in the workshop. "Aren't you?" He replied with a wink. "Who baked him cookies in the shape of stars yesterday?" "This is different," Emily poked him with her elbow. "This is love through food." Their life was simple but complete. They celebrated small victories. Liam's first tooth, his first words, "Daddy," was the first, and John was still proud of it. Their third wedding anniversary, when Mark, who was always there, got drunk and fell into the cake. Even the tough days when Liam had a cold or John was late at work ended with laughter and hugs. This was the family John had dreamed of in Afghanistan, and now it was his. The morning before the picnic was hot. The air smelled of grass and summer. John made coffee while Liam sat in a chair, swinging his legs and eating oatmeal with honey. "Are we going to fish?" he asked, smearing honey on his chin. "If you're lucky," John replied, placing the mug in front of Emily. "But first I'll teach you how to throw pebbles into the water." "How are you?" Liam opened his eyes wide. "Better than me," Emily said, taking a sip of her coffee. "Your dad is a stone champion." John smiled as he looked at them. "Get ready, team. The lake is waiting." Emily stood up, stretching. "I'll make sandwiches. Check the car, champ. I don't want to get stuck in the middle of the road." "Yes, ma'am," John saluted playfully, picking up Liam. "Let's go, assistant. Let's look at our Ford." They went out into the yard, where an old pickup truck stood under a canopy. John sat Liam on the hood, opening it to check the oil. The kid watched him work, asking a million questions. "What is this? Why? Is it spinning?" John answered patiently, explaining everything he knew and feeling his heart swell. These were their moments, simple but priceless. "Ready," he said, closing the hood. "You're a mechanic now, Liam." "I'm a mechanic," he shouted, clapping his hands. "The best." John picked him up, twirling him in the air until Liam squealed with delight. The lake was located half an hour from the house, outside the city, surrounded by pine trees and fields. John drove, Emily sat next to him, humming to the radio, and Liam played with a toy car in the back seat. The sky was clear, the sun was hot, and John rolled down the window, letting in the warm wind. "Do you remember how we went here before the wedding?" Emily asked, looking at him. "Of course," he replied. "Then you dropped the sandwich into the water, and I dived for it." "And caught it," she laughed, wet but proud. "Everything is for you," he said, taking her hand. "Today will be even better. With our boyfriend." She squeezed his fingers. "Yes, this is our first family picnic for the three of us. I want him to remember this." "He will remember," John promised. "We will make every day special." They arrived at the lake at noon. The water sparkled under the sun, light waves splashed on the shore, and the air smelled of pine trees and earth. John pulled a blanket out of the trunk, Emily pulled out a basket of food, and Liam ran toward the water, shouting, "Lake! Lake!" "Hey, not so fast!" John caught up with him, picking him up in his arms. "First we'll relax, and then we'll play." "Pebbles," Liam demanded, struggling. "Soon," John promised, setting him down. "Help Mom with the blanket." Emily laid out a blanket under the tree, laying out sandwiches, apples, and a bottle of lemonade. "Liam, come here," she called. "Eat something, otherwise Dad will steal everything." "I'm not that hungry," John countered, sitting down next to him. "Oh yes," she winked. "I remember how you ate 3 servings of pie at our wedding." "It was one time," he rolled his eyes, but smiled. They ate and laughed, watching Liam chase a butterfly until he plopped down on the blanket, demanding lemonade. John poured it into a plastic cup, and Emily wiped his face with a napkin. "You're all sticky," she said. "How do you manage?" "I'm a champion," Liam stated, repeating the word he heard John say. "Exactly," John patted him on the head. "My champion." After eating, John took Liam by the hand and led him to the water. The shore was strewn with small stones, smooth and warm from the sun. He chose one, showing it to his son. "Look," he said, swinging his hand. "You have to throw it so that it jumps on the water. Like this." The stone flew away, bouncing 3 times before sinking. Liam clapped his hands. "More, more. Now you." John gave him a small stone. "Throw it." Liam swung his hand, and the stone splashed straight into the water. He frowned, but John laughed. "The first attempt is a warm-up. Let's do it again." They threw rocks until Liam got one jump. He screamed with joy, jumping in place, and John caught him, spinning in the air. "Did you see it?" he shouted to Emily, who was sitting on the blanket. "We have talent. I see." She waved her hand. "My champions." John set Liam down, and he ran towards the water, collecting more rocks. John looked at him, feeling his heart swell. It was a perfect summer, a perfect day. Emily called to them, starting a small fire from the branches John had collected earlier. "Come here, boys," she shouted. "Let's roast marshmallows." Liam arrived first, and John followed, carrying a couple more stones that his son left him as a keepsake. He sat down next to Emily, watching as she put a marshmallow on a stick. "Give it to me," he said, holding out his hand. "I am a master of marshmallows." "Oh, really?" She narrowed her eyes. "Who burned it to cinders last time?" "It was an experiment," he objected, laughing. Liam sat between them, holding his wand over the fire. The marshmallow was browned, and John helped him remove it, blowing to cool it. "Tasty?" he asked. "Yes." Liam stuffed the marshmallow into his mouth, smearing it on his face. "You're covered in sugar." Emily wiped his cheeks. "But you are my sweet boy." John looked at them, feeling the warmth not from the fire, but from them. He leaned towards Emily and whispered, "I love you, more than anything else." "And we you," she answered, kissing him on the cheek. A couple of hours later, they sat by the fire, lulled by the warmth and the quiet crackling of branches. John placed another branch, watching sparks fly into the air. Liam, fingers sticky from marshmallows, slumped against him, holding the last pebble. "Dad, look," he muttered sleepily, showing the stone. "Handsome," John smiled, hugging him. "Let's rest a little, okay?" Emily moved closer, resting her head on John's shoulder. "My boys," she said quietly, closing her eyes. "The best." They settled on the blanket, Liam between them, his breathing becoming more even. John looked at his son, at Emily, feeling how tiredness and happiness mixed inside. The sun was going down and a light breeze was shaking the pine trees. He closed his eyes, hugging them both, and fell asleep to the whisper of the lake. When John opened his eyes, the sun was already setting on the horizon, turning the sky crimson. He stretched, feeling the coolness of the evening, and turned to Emily. She woke up blinking, her hand lying where Liam should have been. "Liam," she called, sitting down. John sat up abruptly, looking around. The blanket was empty. The pebble lay nearby, but Liam was not there. "Liam," he shouted, jumping to his feet. Emily jumped up next, her voice trembling. "Where is he? John, where is he?" They rushed to the water, calling him, but the shore was empty. The lake was silent, smooth and still, as if nothing had happened. John froze, looking at the water, his heart sank with horror. "Liam!" Emily screamed, her voice echoing off the trees. John stepped towards her, grabbing her hand, but everything inside broke off. They fell asleep together and woke up without him. The world that was their happiness disappeared into silence. John stood at the small grave, clutching a black umbrella, although it was not raining. The sky was gray and heavy, as if it knew that today there was no place for the sun. He felt like an old man, his shoulders were hunched, his eyes were sunken from sleepless nights. Liam lay nearby, their Liam, under a mound of earth that seemed too small for the boy who, just a week ago, had laughed and thrown pebbles into the lake. John looked at the inscription on the stone, Liam John McCain, 2009 to 2012 inches, and could not believe that it was true. Emily stood on the left, in a black dress that hung on her like on a hanger. Her arms were crossed, and her gaze was empty, directed somewhere past the grave. She didn't cry, the tears ran out. They made a mistake, they all fell asleep by the lake together, hugging each other, and woke up without him. "John," Mark's voice was quiet. He came up behind him, putting his hand on his shoulder. "Let's go. It's all over." John shook his head, not taking his eyes off the grave. "No, it's not over. He should be here with us." Mark sighed, his fingers tightening. "I know, but you need to go, for Emily's sake." John looked at her. She didn't move, didn't even blink. He wanted to take her hand, but something inside stopped him. She seemed so far away, as if she had left with Liam. "Okay," he said hoarsely, turning to Mark. "Let's go." The funeral was short. Pastor Hill, the same one who married them 4 years ago, said something about heaven and peace, but the words flew by. Several people came: Emily's parents, Mark, a couple of neighbors. Tom and Linda stood behind them, hugging each other, their faces red from crying. Linda was sobbing, holding a handkerchief to her lips, and Tom was looking at the ground as if he wanted to fall into it. "Are you okay?" Mark was next to me again, holding a bottle of water in his hands. "No," John answered, not even trying to lie. "Would you be?" Mark lowered his head, handing him the water. "I don't know what to say, brother. This is wrong." He was. It was. John took the bottle, but did not open it. "And now he's gone. We fell asleep, Mark. They fell asleep, and he left." "It's not your fault," Mark said firmly, "and not hers." John squeezed the bottle until the plastic cracked. "I had to. I'm his father. I had to keep him safe." Mark was silent, looking at him. Then he nodded, retreating. "If anything, I'm here." John didn't answer. He looked at Emily, who was still standing by the tree, her silhouette ghostly in the gray light. They returned home in silence. The car drove slowly, John drove, and Emily sat next to him, looking out the window. The radio was turned off, and only the sound of tires on asphalt filled the void. The house greeted them with silence, no Liam's laughter, no stomping on the floor. His toys were where he had left them, the car by the sofa, the blocks on the carpet. John froze in the doorway, feeling his throat tighten. "I'll make some tea," Emily said, her voice flat and empty. She walked into the kitchen without looking at him. John nodded, although she couldn't see. He sat down on the sofa, staring at the typewriter. The red truck he made for Liam for his last birthday. He took it in his hands and ran his finger over the wheels. They were still spinning. Emily returned with 2 mugs, placing one in front of him. The tea smelled like mint, but John didn't touch it. "We need to talk," he said quietly. She sat down opposite him, looking into her mug. "About what?" "About what happened." He squeezed the typewriter tighter. "We can't just remain silent." Emily looked up, and there was something sharp, almost evil, in them. "What can I say, John? He left. We were sleeping, and he left. What is there to discuss?" "I don't know," he admitted, feeling his voice tremble. "But I can't do that. I see him everywhere. I hear him." She pressed her lips together, her fingers clenching around the mug. Me too. Every time I close my eyes, I see him calling us. But he's not there, and talking about it. It won't bring him back. John lowered his head, feeling tears sting his eyes. I should have held it. I always held it. Emily stood up. Her movements were sharp. Stop it, she said, her voice breaking. Stop blaming yourself. It won't help. She went into the bedroom, slamming the door. John remained sitting, looking at the typewriter. He wanted to go after her, hug her, tell her that they could handle it. But the words stuck like stones in my throat. It was a long night. John lay on the sofa, unable to go into the bedroom. Emily didn't come out, and he heard her walking back and forth, opening drawers, whispering something. He closed his eyes, but sleep did not come. And then emptiness. At dawn he got up, made coffee, but did not drink it. I went into the yard where Liam's tricycle was parked under a canopy. John sat down next to him, looking at him, and for the first time in a week he cried quietly, without a sound, just letting the tears flow. Emily came out an hour later, her eyes red but dry. She stopped in the doorway, looking at him. You weren't sleeping, she said. It wasn't a question. I can't, he answered, wiping his face with his sleeve. And you? Also, she leaned against the doorframe. I put his things away, in the box. John nodded, although his insides tightened. Maybe it wasn't necessary. We must, she snapped. I can't look at them every day. He stood up, stepping towards her. Emily, we need to stick together. We're still us. She looked at him, and there was something alien in her gaze. Who are we without him, John? Tell me. She turned away, walking back into the house. John remained standing, feeling the silence between them become a wall. Mark arrived in the afternoon. He knocked and entered uninvited, carrying a bag of food, some sandwiches, and a bottle of water. His face was gloomy, but he tried to smile. I decided to check on you, he said, putting the package on the table. How are you? John shrugged, sitting on the couch. We live. And Emily? Mark looked around. In the bedroom, John answered, doesn't want to talk. Mark sat down next to him, opening the package. Give her time, and for myself too. This doesn't go away in a day. I know, John said, looking at the floor. But she's leaving me, Mark. I feel. She's not leaving, Mark objected. She just got lost. So are you. You will find each other if you want. John nodded, but in his heart he didn't believe it. He took the sandwich, but didn't eat it. He just held it in his hands, as if it could make a difference. You were a good father, Mark added quietly. And she's a good mother. Don't forget this. Thank you, John said, but the words sounded empty. Mark left after half an hour, leaving them alone again in silence. Emily came out in the evening and sat silently at the table, looking out the window. John looked at her, wanted to say something, but didn't know what. They were together, but further apart than ever. November 2012, Ohio. John returned from work at 5:30, when the sky had already darkened and the air had become cold and prickly. The workshop had been noisy all day, motors humming, tools clanking, but he barely noticed it. His hands worked automatically, tightening bolts, checking oil, repairing an old tractor. Thoughts were at home with Emily, with the emptiness that had settled between them since August. He opened the door, brushing dust off his boots. The house was quiet, no sound of the TV, no footsteps, no voice that had previously greeted him with a cry of "Daddy's home." Only the smell of coal from the fireplace, which had long gone out. John took off his jacket, hanging it on a hook, and walked into the living room. Emily sat there in the dark on the couch, staring at the wall. Her hands were on her knees, and an untouched cup of tea stood in front of her. I'm home, he said, stopping at the door. She didn't turn around, just nodded slightly. Okay, her voice was dry, like autumn leaves outside the window. John stood for a second, waiting for something, a question, a look, a word. But there was nothing. He walked into the kitchen, glancing at the empty table. Emily used to prepare dinner for his arrival. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, sometimes pie. Now the stove was cold and the sink was empty. He opened the refrigerator, a couple of eggs, a piece of cheese, a can of beer. He took the beer, clicked the cap, and returned to the living room. "Have you eaten?" he asked, sitting down in the chair opposite. "No," she answered without looking at him. "Don't want to." He nodded, taking a sip from the can. The silence between them was thick, like the fog that hung over the fields every morning. 3 months have passed, and from then on, the words between them became less and less frequent, as if their supply had dried up. John looked at her, trying to find the Emily he knew. The one who laughed at his jokes, danced with him at the wedding, sang lullabies to Liam. Her hair, once shiny and soft, now hung in dull strands, and her face was drawn, her eyes darkened. She didn't leave the house, didn't call her friends, didn't answer the phone when her mother called. John had changed too. He felt it in his shoulders, in the way he struggled to get up in the morning, in the way he avoided mirrors, afraid to see the emptiness in his eyes. "I'll cook something," he said, standing up. "Omelet, maybe." "No need," she snapped. "I'm not hungry." He froze, looking at her. "Emily, you haven't eaten all day. I know you haven't eaten." She raised her head, her gaze sharp, almost hostile. "And what? Are you my supervisor now?" "No," he squeezed the can harder. "I'm just worried." "No need," she turned to the wall. "I'm fine." John wanted to argue, to say that she was not okay, that they were both not okay. But the words stuck, as always. He went into the kitchen, put the beer on the table, and turned on the stove. Break 2 eggs into a bowl, beat them with a fork, add salt. The movements were mechanical, like in a workshop. He wasn't hungry, but he cooked because it was something normal, something he could control. Emily walked in as the omelet was already sizzling in the pan. She stopped in the doorway, looking at him. Her arms were crossed, as if she was protecting herself from something. "You don't have to," she said quietly. "I know," he answered without turning around, "but I want to." She was silent while he served the omelet onto plates. He placed one on the table in front of her and took the other for himself. He sat down opposite, looking at her. "Eat," he said. "Please." Emily looked at the plate, then at him. Her lips trembled, but she took the fork, broke off a piece, and put it in her mouth. John watched her chew, slowly, without pleasure, as if it were a duty. He did the same, although the food seems tasteless. "Thank you," she said after a minute, pushing the plate away. "You're welcome." He took a sip of beer. "Would you like some more tea?" "No," she stood up. "I'll go to bed." John nodded as he watched her leave. The bedroom door closed quietly, without a bang, but the sound was louder than a scream. He stayed at the table, finishing the omelet he didn't want and drinking the beer that didn't warm him up. Night fell over the house like a heavy blanket. John sat in the living room, looking at the empty couch where Liam's toys used to be. Emily put them in a box after the funeral, hid them in the closet, but he still saw them, the car, the blocks, the teddy bear Liam called Boo. He got up, went to the closet, and opened the door. The box sat on the shelf, neatly sealed with tape. John extended his hand, but stopped. Couldn't open it. "Why are you there?" Emily's voice came from behind, weak but sharp. He turned around. She stood in the bedroom doorway, wearing an old t-shirt and barefoot. "Nothing," he said, closing the closet. "Just thinking." "About him?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "Yes," he admitted, "all the time about him." Emily stepped towards him, her face tense. "And what does this give? Do you think he'll come back if you look at his stuff?" "No," John lowered his head. "But I can't forget." "Can I?" Her voice broke. "You think I don't see him every day, can't hear him? But I don't dwell on the past, John. It's no use." He looked at her, feeling anger and pain mixing inside. "I don't dig. I don't know how to live without him." Emily clenched her fists, her breathing became heavy. "Do I know? Do you think it's easy for me? I was his mother. I should have stayed awake." "We both fell asleep," he said quietly. "It's not your fault." "Then whose?" She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Yours? God? Lake's? Whose, John?" He was silent, unable to find an answer. She turned away, walking back to the bedroom. The door closed, and the silence returned, even heavier than before. John lay down on the sofa without undressing. The bedroom was their place, but after Liam he couldn't sleep there. The bed seemed too big, too empty. He looked at the ceiling, counting the cracks, as he had done on his first night home after the army. Then Emily was nearby. Her warmth drove the nightmares away. Now the nightmares were different, not war, but silence, in which there was no Liam's laughter. He closed his eyes, trying to remember something good. Their wedding, Liam's birth, the picnic by the lake before everything fell apart. But the memory failed. Each image ended with an empty blanket, a cold sore, her cry, "Where is he?" John clenched his fists, feeling tears streaming down his temples. He didn't wipe them, let them flow. An hour later, he heard footsteps. Emily came out, her silhouette flashing in the darkness. She stopped by the sofa, looking at him. "You're not sleeping," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," he answered without opening his eyes. "And you?" "Also," she paused. "I didn't want to scream." He opened his eyes, looking at her. Her face was pale, the shadows under her eyes appeared bruised. "I know," he said. "I didn't want to either." She nodded, sitting down on the edge of the sofa. Her hands shook, but she did not remove them. "I can't do this, John," she whispered. "I don't know what to do." "And I don't know." He sat down, looking at her. "But we have to. We have to do something." Emily shook her head, her voice barely audible. "I can't do it." She stood up, walking back to the bedroom. March 2013, Ohio. John walked home in the light rain, clutching the keys to the workshop in his pocket. Winter, which had been dragging on since November, was finally giving way to spring, but there was no added warmth in his life. Work was his refuge. The roar of engines, the smell of oil, the clanking of tools drowned out the silence that settled at home after Liam. He took overtime, stayed late, repaired everything he could get his hands on, just so as not to come back longer to occupy his brain. But today, the tractor he was repairing turned out to be simpler than he had hoped, and at 6 in the evening, he was already free. The journey home took 15 minutes on foot, and he walked slowly, feeling the dampness soaking into his jacket. Emily didn't leave the house, didn't cook, didn't smile. John didn't know how to get through to her. Every conversation ended with her leaving for the bedroom or his silent retreat to the sofa. They lived together, but as shadows of each other. In January, Emily started drinking, not a lot, but regularly. A glass of wine with dinner, then two, then a bottle hidden in the closet. John noticed empty bottles in the trash, but didn't speak up. He was afraid that it would close even more. She stopped cleaning the house. Dishes piled up in the sink, dust settled on the shelves. A box of Liam's things sat in the closet, untouched. Her mother, Linda, called every week, but Emily hung up, muttering, "I don't want to talk." Mark began to appear more often. After the funeral, he came by once a week, brought food, sat with John, tried to pull him out of his silence. But in recent months, he began to come when John was not at home. Emily opened the door for him, and they sat in the living room. At first, they just talked, then they drank together. John didn't know about it. He was at work, fixing cars, avoiding the house. Mark was their mutual friend, a best man at a wedding, a brother in arms from Afghanistan. John trusted him as he trusted himself. Emily wasn't looking for this. She was drowning in loneliness, in wine, in the emptiness that Liam left behind. Mark was familiar, warm, alive, unlike John, who retreated deeper and deeper into himself. One day in February, she burst into tears in front of him, telling him how she saw Liam in her dreams, how she woke up with his name on her lips. Mark hugged her, just hugged her, and she didn't pull away. It was the first warmth in months. Then there was another evening, another bottle of wine, another hug that lasted longer than necessary. Today Mark came at 4 while John was in the workshop. Emily sat in the kitchen, looking at her empty tea mug. The rain pattered on the windows, and she felt the cold creeping inside. When Mark knocked, she opened the door without a word, letting him in. "Hi," he said, shaking water off his jacket. "How are you?" "As always," she replied, her voice dull. "Come in." He brought a bottle of whiskey, not wine, something stronger. He put it on the table and sat down opposite. "I thought you needed something more serious," he said, opening the lid. "Want?" Emily shrugged but nodded. "Why not?" They drank in silence, first a sip, then a full glass. Mark talked about working at the factory, about how his car broke down, about a stupid joke a colleague told. Emily listened without delving into it, but his voice was an anchor, something that kept her here in this moment. She didn't notice how the bottle was empty, how her head was spinning, how Mark moved closer. "You shouldn't be alone," he said quietly, looking at her. "This is wrong." "I'm not alone," she answered, but the words sounded empty. "I have John." "Where is he?" Mark leaned over. His hand lay on hers. "Is he here? With you?" Emily looked at his hand, feeling the warmth of his fingers. John hadn't touched her for months, hadn't hugged her, hadn't held her hand, hadn't even looked at her for a long time. She knew he was suffering, but her own pain screamed louder. Mark was here, alive, real. "I don't know," she whispered, and tears flowed down her cheeks. Mark moved even closer, wiping them with his thumb. "I'm here, Emily. I won't leave." She didn't resist when he hugged her, didn't push her away when his lips found hers. It wasn't about love, it wasn't about passion, it was about feeling something other than emptiness. John entered the house at 7:30, shaking the rain from his hair. The lights in the living room were off, but sounds were coming from the bedroom, rustling, a quiet voice. He froze, feeling something cold squeezing his chest. He left his jacket on the floor and stepped towards the stairs. The bedroom door was slightly open, and he saw them. They didn't notice John, too caught up in each other, too lost in their own. The sound of his steps was drowned in the creaking of the bed. "What?" John's voice was hoarse, as if it had been torn from his throat. "What are you doing?" Emily shuddered, opening her eyes. Mark turned around, his face turning pale. "John," he said, stepping back. "Damn I." Emily sat up, pulling on her dress, her eyes darting between them. "John, this is not what you think," she began, but the words hung in the air, absurd and empty. "Isn't that right?" He stepped closer, clenching his fists. "You're with my best friend. In our bedroom." "What is this, Emily?" Mark stood up, raising his hands. "Listen, brother, I didn't mean to. It just happened. But I love her." "Shut up," John snapped, his voice shaking with anger. "Get out." Mark grabbed his shirt, retreating to the door. "Sorry, John. I'm sorry." He left, slamming the front door, and John remained standing, looking at Emily. She was sitting on the bed, her face was red, her eyes were full of tears. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why him?" "Because you left," she said quietly, looking at the floor. "You are here, but you are not there. I'm alone, John, alone all the time." "Did I leave?" He stepped towards her, feeling anger mixed with pain. I'm trying. I'm trying to keep us together." "You're not holding it." She raised her eyes, her voice becoming louder. "You are silent. You are sleeping on the sofa. You don't look at me. You don't even touch me. And he was here." John clenched his jaw, feeling tears sting his eyes. "Is it because of Liam? Are you blaming me?" "No," she shook her head, her voice trembling. "I blame myself. But you don't even try to help me." He looked at her, not knowing what to say. The pain he had been carrying for 7 months burst out, but instead of screaming, he turned and walked away. The keys were left on the table, the jacket was on the floor. He walked out into the rain without looking back. John walked down the street without feeling the cold. Rain ran down his face, mixing with the tears he couldn't hold back. He thought about Liam, about that day at the lake, about how everything had fallen apart. Now Emily, his Emily, was with Mark, the person he trusted the most. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was the end of who they were. He reached the park, sat on a bench, looking at the wet grass. Her words were spinning in my head. "You left." Maybe she was right. He didn't know how to be with her after Liam, how to talk, how to live. But she opened up to Mark, not to him, not to her husband, and it cut deeper than he could bear. At home, Emily sat on her bed, looking at the empty room. She didn't cry, the tears ran out. Her hands shook as she removed the sheets that smelled of wine. She didn't love Mark, it wasn't about him. It was about not going crazy. But now John was gone, and she knew she had lost him too. The night passed in silence. John didn't return, and Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Their marriage, their love, their family, everything was drowned in silence, and she did not know how to fix it. June 2013, Ohio. John sat on the wooden bench in the courtroom, looking at his hands. The hall was small, with worn linoleum and dim light pouring from the windows. Across the aisle, Emily sat, her face pale, her eyes downcast. Mark stood next to her, tall and tense, with his hands in his pockets. John didn't look at them, he couldn't. The judge, an older woman with gray hair pulled back into a tight bun, was leafing through papers at her desk. Her voice, dry and businesslike, cut through the silence. The case is McCain v. McCain. Divorce by mutual consent. Any objections? John was silent. Emily, too. Their lawyers, cheap, hastily hired, looked at each other and shook their heads. "No, Your Honor," said John's lawyer, a skinny guy in a rumpled suit. "No," echoed Emily's lawyer, a tired-eyed woman. The judge nodded, writing something down. "Property?" she asked, looking over her glasses. "The house remains Mrs. McCain," John's lawyer began. "Mr. McCain takes the car and personal belongings. There are no debts, no children." He paused. "No children." John clenched his fists, feeling the word children pierce his chest. Liam. His name was not spoken, but hung in the air like a shadow. Emily flinched, but didn't look up. "Do you confirm?" The judge looked at Emily. "Yes." Her voice was quiet, almost inaudible. "Mr. McCain?" "Yes," John said, looking at the floor. The judge tapped her pen on the table. "The divorce has been finalized. Sign the documents, and you are free." 3 months after that night in the bedroom passed in a blur. John did not return home after finding Emily with Mark. He slept in the workshop on an old sofa in the utility room until he rented a room above a bar 2 miles from the house. Emily called once, the next day, her voice on the phone trembling. "John, come back, we'll talk." He hung up the call without answering. There was nothing to talk about. She filed for divorce in April, a month after that scene. John did not argue. He signed the papers that her lawyer brought without reading. The house was hers. He didn't want it. Didn't want to go back to where everything reminded him of Liam, where the bed smelled of betrayal. The car, an old Ford, was his only salvation. He drove it to the workshop, slept in it when he could not stand the cramped room. Mark came to his workshop a week after that night. His face was red, his eyes guilty. "John, listen," he began, standing at the entrance. "Go away," John interrupted, without looking up from the engine he was repairing. "Brother, I said go away." John straightened up, clutching the wrench. "One more word and I'll break your jaw." Mark left, and they haven't spoken since. John heard from the guys in the workshop that Mark and Emily were now together. They saw them in the store, in the cafe. He didn't ask, didn't want to know. But every rumor is cut like a knife. In the courtroom, he signed the papers without looking at Emily. His lawyer handed him a copy, tapping him on the shoulder. "That's it, you're free," he said, as if it was good news. John nodded, tucking the paper into his jeans pocket. Free. The words sounded empty. He stood up, heading towards the exit, but Emily called out to him. "John." Her voice was weak but firm. He stopped without turning around. "What?" "Sorry," she said, "for everything." He clenched his jaw, feeling anger and pain fighting inside. "Goodbye, Emily," he said, without looking at her, and left. Mark stood at the door, but John walked past without even slowing down. The rain began again, fine and cold, and he sat in the Ford, looking at the drops running down the glass. It was the end of their marriage, of their family, of their past. John drove to his room without turning on the radio. Silence was his companion now, and he got used to it. He thought about Liam, about how the three of them could sit together now, eat ice cream, laugh. But Liam was gone, Emily was gone, and he was left alone. The divorce was just paperwork. The real loss happened a long time ago, by the lake, and then in that bedroom. He parked at the bar and went up to the room. There was a bottle of whiskey on the table yesterday. John poured himself a glass and drank it in one gulp, feeling the warmth spreading through his chest. It didn't help, but at least something filled the void. April 2018, Ohio. John stood in the garage, leaning over an old Harley motorcycle. He was 38, and his scarred and calloused hands moved confidently as he dismantled the carburetor. The garage was his sanctuary, a small extension to the workshop he had rented 5 years ago after his divorce. The place smelled of gasoline and metal, dust settled on the shelves, and an old radio played country music quietly. This was his world, where there was no Emily, Mark, or Liam, just him and work. 5 years have passed since he signed the papers in court. 5 years of loneliness, which he himself chose. After his divorce, he gave up the room above the bar, bought a used trailer, and parked it on the outskirts of town, next to a field. He lived simply. He slept, ate, worked. Friends from the workshop invited him to the bar to go fishing, but he refused. He didn't want conversations. He didn't want pity. Mark disappeared from his life completely. They said he left Ohio with Emily, then without her. John didn't ask. "Hey, John," the voice of Bill, the owner of the workshop, was heard at the entrance. "Are you still here?" John straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag. "Where else should I be?" Bill, a heavy-set man with a gray beard, chuckled. "At home, for example. It's already 8. Go get some rest." "I'm fine," John said, returning to the motorcycle. "I want to finish." "You always want to finish," Bill shook his head. "Okay, close it later. The keys are on the table." He left and John was left alone. The radio started playing Sweet Home Alabama, and he turned up the volume, drowning out the silence. The motorcycle was old and rusty. A client brought it in last week and said he wanted to restore it. John loved orders like these. They gave him a purpose and filled his time. Life in the trailer was simple. In the morning, he drank coffee from a tin mug, looking at the field. During the day, he worked in the workshop, sometimes taking overtime. He spent his evenings in the garage, fixing something of his own, an old radio, a broken chair, this Harley. I ate little sandwiches, canned food, sometimes pizza if Bill ordered for everyone. I didn't sleep well. The nightmares about Liam came less often, but they didn't go away. He saw him by the lake, heard his laughter, woke up with emptiness in his chest. People in the city knew its history, a small town where gossip travels faster than the wind. "Poor John," they whispered behind him. "I lost my son, then my wife." He wasn't paying attention. He didn't care what they thought, as long as they left him alone. He worked until midnight, until his fingers began to ache. The carburetor was clean, and the bike was almost ready. John sat on the box, looking at his work. The radio went silent, and the silence returned, heavy and familiar. "Liam would love it," he said out loud, looking at Harley. "We would ride together." The words hung in the air, and he closed his eyes, imagining his son next to him, his curls, his smile. But the image slipped away, leaving only dust and cold. John stood up, turned off the lights, and closed the garage. He walked to the trailer under the stars, feeling loneliness following on his heels. At home, he opened a beer and sat on the porch. The night was clear. The moon hung above the field like a lantern. He thought about the past, about the wedding, about Liam, about that night with Mark. The pain became quieter over 5 years, but did not go away. He lived, but did not feel alive. The garage, the trailer, the work, it was a shell, but inside there was emptiness. John finished his beer, throwing the can into the grass. Tomorrow will be a new day, a new order, a new attempt to forget. But he knew he wouldn't forget, not Liam, not Emily, not himself, who he was before all this. John was driving down the highway in his old Ford when it began to rain, first lightly, then heavily, pouring down the windshield. He was 38 and was returning from a long day of repairing a truck with a broken radiator. The radio was playing old rock music quietly, but he barely listened. His thoughts were as empty as the road ahead. 5 years of loneliness had accustomed him to silence, and the rain was just another sound that did not disturb it. The headlights caught a silhouette on the side of the road, a car, A white Chevrolet stood with the hood raised, and a figure in a yellow raincoat loomed nearby. John slowed down without thinking. He didn't like to interfere, but leaving someone out in the rain and the dark wasn't his style, not after he'd spent too many nights alone. He parked behind him, turning on his hazard lights, and got out, pulling up the hood of his jacket. The rain lashed my face, cold and harsh. The figure turned around a woman, about 35, with wet strands of hair sticking to her cheeks. Her eyes were dark, tired, but there was something alive in them that John had not seen for a long time. "Problems?" he asked, coming closer. The voice was hoarse from the long silence. "Yeah," she answered, wiping her hands on her jeans. "It died out in the middle of nowhere. Do you understand this? Something like that." He nodded at the Ford. "I can look." She stepped back to give him space. "I will be grateful. I'm Sarah, by the way." "John," he said, leaning over the engine. The rain ran down his neck, but he didn't notice. "What's happened?" "It was driving fine, then it started buzzing, and that's it." She shrugged. "I'm not an expert on cars." He nodded, checking the battery, hoses, looking under the hood. The rain drummed on the metal, drowning out his thoughts. A couple of minutes later, he found the problem: the alternator belt broke and the engine overheated. "The belt broke," he said, straightening up. "I can put a spare one if you have one, or tow it to the city." Sarah sighed, looking at him from under her hood. "There is no spare time. Is towing the solution?" "Yes," he nodded. "I have a cable in my car. I'll take it to the workshop and fix it there." She smiled, weakly but sincerely. "Thank you, John. You are my savior today." He shrugged, hiding his awkwardness. "I just do what I can." John took the cable out of the trunk and hitched her Chevrolet to his Ford. The rain got heavier, and they were both soaked through as he secured the hooks. Sarah stood nearby, holding the flashlight he gave her, shining it into his hands. "Do you often help people out like this?" she asked, shouting over the sound of the rain. "Not often," he answered, tightening the knot. "I just happened to be nearby." "Lucky me," she said. "Otherwise, I would have spent the night here with mosquitoes." He chuckled, almost smiling. "Mosquitoes would eat you. Rain will only make them angry." She laughed, and the sound was warm, alive, like something long forgotten. John finished with the cable and wiped his hands on his jeans. Although it was useless, they were already wet. "Get in your car," he said. "I'll drive slowly." The journey to the workshop took half an hour. John drove carefully, feeling the rope tighten behind him. The windshield wipers squeaked and the radio hissed, but he was thinking about Sarah. She was the first one in a long time to catch his attention. Her voice, her laughter, it was something new, and he didn't know what to do with it. The workshop appeared ahead, a dark building with a sign, "Bill and Sons," although Bill had no sons. John parked at the gate, got out, and unhooked the cable. Sarah climbed out of her car, shaking water off her raincoat. "Here we are," he said, opening the garage. "I'll take your car inside and fix it in the morning." "In the morning?" She frowned. "Isn't it possible today?" "There are no spare parts." He shook his head. "I'll order a belt in the morning. It will be ready by lunchtime." She nodded, looking at him. "Okay. How will I get home?" John thought about it. The city was 5 miles away, there were no taxis here, and he couldn't leave her alone. "I can give you a lift," he said. "Where do you live?" "On Oak Street," she answered. "Isn't it far?" "No." He closed the garage. "Sit down." They drove in his Ford, the rain pounding on the roof, and the heat of the stove slowly dried their clothes. Sarah sat nearby, looking out the window, her hands on her knees. John was silent, not knowing what to say. He is not used to passengers. He has been traveling alone for the last 5 years. "Are you always so silent?" she asked, turning to him. "It happens," he answered, looking at the road. "I don't like to talk much." "And I love you," she said with a smile. "But I won't torture you. Thanks for helping." "You're welcome," he shrugged. "This is the job." "You didn't have to," she objected. "I could have passed by. Many would do this." John remained silent, feeling her words sink in. He was not a hero, just a man who could not pass by. but her gratitude was warm, and he didn't know how to react to it. "Are you local?" she asked, changing the subject. "Yes," he nodded. "Born here." "And you?" "I moved a couple of years ago," she said. "I work in a hospital as a nurse. I like it quiet, but I had no luck with the car." "It happens," he said. They arrived at Oak Street, a narrow street lined with neat houses. Sarah pointed to a white cottage with blue shutters. "Here's mine," she said. "Thank you, John. How much do I owe you?" "Nothing," he shook his head. "Just an accident." She looked at him, her eyes serious. "No, I have to. Let's do this tomorrow. When I pick up the car, I'll treat you to coffee. Agree?" John froze, not expecting this. Coffee. With someone. He hasn't had coffee with people since everything fell apart. "Don't," he began, but she interrupted. "Necessary. I insist. Tomorrow in the workshop after work. Agreed?" He looked at her wet hair, her warm smile. Something inside trembled, and he nodded. "Okay? Tomorrow." "Great." She opened the door, stepping out into the rain. "Good night, John." "Calm," he answered, watching her run to the porch. John drove to the trailer, feeling a strange warmth. Sarah was a chance meeting, but her voice, her offer of coffee stuck in my head. He didn't look for people, didn't want them, but she didn't ask permission, she just entered his day like rain that night. Toma, he sat on the porch, looking at the stars breaking through the clouds. The rain subsided, leaving puddles glistening in the moonlight. John thought about Liam, about Emily, but for the first time in a long time, the thoughts didn't cut so hard. Maybe it was just that day, maybe something more. He didn't know, but tomorrow there would be coffee, and that was something new. June 2018, Ohio. John stood at the workbench in the workshop, finishing work on Sarah's Chevrolet. The day dragged on slowly. The morning was spent replacing the alternator belt, checking the engine, and test driving around the yard. The car was ready by noon, but he still tinkered with it, tightening bolts, wiping the hood, just to not think about the fact that Sarah had promised to come by after work. Coffee. He hadn't had coffee with someone since Emily left his life 5 years ago, and the thought of it felt foreign, like an old suit that no longer fits. The workshop door creaked, and he turned around. Sarah came in, no longer wearing a raincoat, wearing jeans and a blue shirt, with a bag over her shoulder. Her hair was pulled back into a ponytail, and her face looked fresher than yesterday in the rain. She smiled when she noticed him. "Hi, mechanic," she said, coming closer. "Is my old lady ready?" "Yes," John nodded, wiping his hands with a rag. "Everything works. You can check." She glanced at the Chevrolet, then at him. "I trust you. If you say it's ready, then it is." He shrugged, hiding his awkwardness. "The keys are on the table. You can pick it up." "Not so fast," Sarah crossed her arms, her smile widening. "We agreed on coffee. Do you remember?" John froze, looking at her. He hoped she would forget that it was just being polite. But her eyes were warm and persistent, and he couldn't find a way to refuse. "Okay," he said quietly. "Where?" "There's a diner nearby." She nodded towards the street. "At Joe's. Shall we go?" He nodded, throwing the rag onto the workbench. "Give me 5 minutes. I'll close it here." Joe's was an old cafe 2 blocks from the shop, a low building with a faded sign and windows plastered with pie advertisements. The inside smelled of coffee, fried bacon, and something sweet, like cinnamon. John followed Sarah in, feeling out of place. The tables were shabby, the seats were upholstered in red vinyl, and a woman in her 50s stood behind the counter, wiping down mugs. "Hi, Marge," Sarah said, waving at her. "2 coffees, as usual." "With milk?" Marge asked, looking at John with curiosity. "Black," he muttered, sitting down opposite Sarah by the window. Sarah smiled as she sat down. "You don't like sweets, do you?" "Not really," he answered, looking at the table. "Simple is better." She nodded as if that explained everything. Marge brought coffee 2 large mugs, steaming and dark. John took his, wrapping his arms around it, feeling the warmth. Sarah added cream to hers, stirring with a spoon. "Well," she said, taking a sip, "tell me, what do you live for besides cars?" John shrugged, looking into his mug. Working. I live in a trailer. Nothing special. Trailer? She narrowed her eyes. This is great. Like in the movies. Not really, he chuckled, almost involuntarily. It's just cheap and quiet. She leaned a little closer, her voice becoming softer. What else? Hobby? Friends? Fix things, he said. Motorcycles, sometimes furniture. Friends? Not many. Sarah nodded without insisting. Clear. And here I am reading. I love detective stories, and I cook, but I won't say that I'm a master. Better than me, obviously, he said, taking a sip of coffee. I only know how to make an omelet. An omelet is already a victory, she laughed. My brother generally only makes toast, and then he sets it on fire. John smiled, a faint but real smile. Her lightness was contagious, and he didn't know how to stop it. They sat for half an hour, and the conversation flowed by itself. Sarah talked about working in the hospital, about the long shifts, about the patients who joked despite the pain, about how she once spilled soup on the doctor. John listened, nodding, occasionally getting a word in. He wasn't used to talking about himself, but her questions were simple and didn't go too deep. Have you always been a mechanic? She asked, finishing her coffee. No, he hesitated. I served before. In the army, then he came back and started fixing it. Army? Her eyes widened. This is serious. Where were you? Afghanistan, he said quietly. 3 years. She nodded, her gaze becoming more serious. It must be hard. My husband also served there. Same? John glanced at her. Is he a mechanic? No, she smiled, but sadly. He was a pilot. Died in 2010. John froze, feeling her words sink in. He knew this pain, not the same, but similar. I sympathize, he said, looking into his mug. Thank you, she answered quietly. It was a long time ago. I'm used to it. And you? Do you have someone? He clenched his jaw. No, he said. Was, not anymore. Sarah didn't ask any more, and he was grateful. She understood where the boundaries were and did not go beyond them. Marge brought the bill, but Sarah grabbed it first. I'm crying, she said, taking out her wallet. It's my duty. Don't, John began, but she waved her hand. Necessary. You saved my car. This is the minimum. He didn't argue, feeling the warmth of her insistence breaking through his walls. They left the cafe, the sun was setting, turning the sky orange. Sarah stopped by her car, looking at him. Thanks for the company, she said. It was good. Yes, he nodded, surprised that it was true. Thank you. She smiled as she opened the door. Maybe we can do it again sometime, not because of a breakdown, but just like that. John froze, not expecting this. His life was a trailer, a garage, and loneliness. But her voice, her eyes, they were something else. Maybe, he said cautiously, if there is time. I'll find you, she winked, getting into the car. Good night, John. Calm, he replied, watching her drive away. John pushed a cart down the supermarket aisle, throwing cans of tuna and a packet of bread into it. He took only what was necessary, did not linger, and avoided people. But today, Saturday evening, the store was full. The noise of voices, the creaking of carts, the crying of children hurt the ears. He turned towards the cash register when he noticed him. Mark stood by the beer shelf, tall, slightly wider in the shoulders than 5 years ago. His blonde hair was shorter and his face was covered in stubble. He held the bottle, reading the label, and didn't see John. John's heart clenched like a fist. Anger, pain, memories hit at once. 5 years have passed since that night. John heard that Mark left Ohio with Emily, then returned alone. Gossip reached the workshop. They broke up. She left. He drinks. John didn't ask, didn't want to know. But now Mark was here, 10 steps away, alive and real. John? Mark's voice rang out as he looked up. His face turned pale, and the bottle almost fell out of his hands. John froze, clutching the handle of the cart. Mark, he said coldly, without moving. Mark stepped closer, his movements awkward. How are you? Okay, John looked past him. And you? So, Mark grinned, but without joy. Came back a couple of months ago. I'm working at the factory again. John nodded, not knowing what to say. Listen, Mark began, lowering the bottle. I know what you're thinking. I I was a bastard. Sorry. 5 years have passed, John said. His voice was even, but everything was boiling inside. It's too late to apologize. I know, Mark nodded, but I had to say. Then, with Emily, it was a mistake. We were both out of our minds. John clenched his jaw, feeling Emily's name hurt his ears. Not yourself. You slept with my wife, Mark, in my house. I know, Mark lowered his head, and I live with this every day. She left me a year later. She said she couldn't forget you. It didn't change anything, but the words stuck in my head. I don't care, he said finally. It's none of my business anymore. Mark nodded, stepping back. John pushed the cart forward. Goodbye. He walked to the cash register, feeling Mark's gaze on his back. On the street, he loaded groceries into the Ford, got behind the wheel, but did not start the engine. I sat looking at the rain, which started again. The phone vibrated in my pocket. Sarah. Hello, her voice was warm, as always. Are you busy? No, he answered, squeezing the steering wheel, only from the store. Great, she said. I baked a pie. Do you want to come in? Yes, he said. Oak Street, as always, she laughed. Come before it gets cold. He arrived 20 minutes later. Sarah met him on the porch, in an apron, with flour on her cheek. Her cottage smelled of apples and cinnamon, and the warmth enveloped it like a blanket. Come in, she said, letting him inside. The pie is just out of the oven. Smells great, he said, taking off his jacket. I hope it tastes the same, she smiled, putting the plates on the table. They ate pie, drank coffee, talked about little things about her shift, about the motorcycle he was repairing. Are you okay? She asked suddenly, looking at him. You look tense. It's just the day, he said, looking away. It's okay. If you want to tell me, I'll listen, she said quietly, without pressure. He nodded, feeling how warm her words were. Thank you, he said. Maybe later. She smiled without insisting. John sat at the table in the trailer, sorting through mail bills, advertising, nothing important. 6 years of friendship with Sarah changed his life, not dramatically, but gently. They met once a week, coffee, cakes, walks. She became his support, but he kept his distance. He was afraid of becoming too attached and losing her again. He tore open another envelope, expecting an electricity bill, but inside was a piece of paper written in familiar handwriting. Emily. His heart sank. He hadn't seen her since the divorce 11 years ago. He didn't know where she was or if she was alive. The last thing he heard from Mark in the store 6 years ago was that she left him, couldn't forget John. He unfolded the letter, feeling his hands tremble. John, it's me, Emily. I don't know if you'll get it, but I have to try. I am sick cancer, the last stage. The doctors give me a couple of months, maybe less. I'm in Cincinnati in hospice. I'm not writing to feel sorry for me. I don't deserve it. I am writing to say sorry. For Liam, for Mark, for everything. I ruined us, and not a day goes by that I don't regret it. I want to see you if you can. Not for me, for you. So that you know that I didn't forget, I didn't stop loving, even when I broke everything. If you don't want to, I'll understand. But if you can, come. Address below. Emily. John reread the letter 3 times, each word cutting like a knife. She's dying. Emily, his Emily, the one who had been his light, then betrayed her, was now leaving forever. He put the piece of paper aside, looking into space. Liam, Mark, divorce, everything came back like a wave. He went to Sarah without calling. Her cottage was quiet. She opened the door in a robe, with wet hair from a shower. John? She was surprised. Did something happen? Yes, he said, entering. Letter. From Emily. She frowned as she closed the door. Your ex-wife? What does she want? She's dying. He sat down on the sofa, holding out the letter. Wants to see me. Sarah took the paper and read it, her face softening. Oh, John, this is hard. What do you think? I don't know. He clenched his fists. She betrayed me, but she's dying, and I can't help but think about her. Sarah sat down next to him, putting the letter on the table. Do you still love her? No, he said quickly, then hesitated. Don't know. It's complicated. I understand, she nodded. He looked at her, feeling her words help. Drive, he asked. If you don't go, you'll regret it, she said quietly. Not for her, for myself. To close this door. John nodded, looking at the letter. She was right, he had to see Emily to let her go. Thank you, he said. You always know what to say. I'm trying, she smiled. Will you go alone? Yes, he nodded. This is mine. He left 2 days later, taking a day off from the workshop. Cincinnati was 3 hours away, and John drove in silence, thinking about the past, the wedding, Liam, that night with Mark. The letter lay in my pocket like a weight. He didn't know what he would say, but he knew he had to be there. The hospice was a gray building on the outskirts. The nurse led him into a room small, with white walls and the smell of medicine. Emily was lying on the bed, thin, pale, with a pipe in her hand. Her hair was short and her eyes were sunken, but it was her. John, she whispered when she saw him. You came. I've come, he said, sitting down next to her. How are you? I'm dying, she smiled weakly, but it's good to see you. He nodded, not knowing what to say. She extended her hand, and he took it cold, trembling. Sorry, she said, for everything. I broke us. It was a long time ago, he said quietly. I'm guilty too. I should have supported you, turned to specialists for help, but I retreated into myself. She shook her head. You were the best. For me, for Liam. They talked for an hour about good days, about pain. When he left, she fell asleep, and he knew that this was goodbye. John stood in a park on the outskirts of the city, holding a shovel. The sun had just risen, flooding the field with soft light, and next to it Sarah was laying out her tools, a small maple seedling, a bucket of water, a pair of gloves. The idea to plant the tree came to her after Emily's death in November. It will be in memory of Liam, she said then, and John agreed, not immediately, but with quiet confidence that it was the right thing to do. 4 months have passed since that day in the hospice when he said goodbye to Emily. Her departure left an emptiness in him, but not as heavy as after Liam. It was a relief that he had let her go, forgiven her enough to breathe more freely. Sarah was there all this time. She came with food, sat with him in the trailer, listened when he spoke, and was silent when there were no words. She didn't replace Emily. She didn't fill Liam's place. She was something new, and John began to get used to her warmth. Ready? Sarah asked, looking at him. She was wearing jeans and an old jacket, her hair pulled back into a messy ponytail. John nodded, stabbing the shovel into the ground. Yes, let's begin. It's a good place, she said, looking around the field. Sun, wind. The maple will grow strong. He smiled, weakly but sincerely. John began to dig, driving the shovel into the soft earth. The hole had to be deep so that the maple roots would take root firmly. He spoke without stopping, for the first time without pain in his voice. Sarah smiled as she watered the soil around the seedling. Sounds like a little adventurer. Yes, John nodded, digging deeper. One day he hid a stone under his pillow. Emily found it and laughed half the night. He said it was for dreams about the sea. She laughed, her voice warm. Smart guy. Who did he get it from? From her, probably, he said. She was like that, she made up stories. Sarah sat down next to him, looking at the hole. You were a good father, John. He knew that you loved him. I hope so, he said quietly, stopping. She reached out her hand, touching his shoulder. He knew. Children feel. John nodded, feeling her words sink in. He dug further until the hole became deep and level. Sarah took the seedling and carefully lowered it into the ground, straightening the roots. Here, she said, handing him the shovel, go to sleep. He began to fill in the soil, layer by layer, until the maple stood upright, its thin trunk swaying in the wind. Sarah watered the roots from a bucket, and together they compacted the soil with their hands. When they finished, they sat on the grass next to the tree, looking at it. The sapling was small but strong, with a few green leaves trembling in the wind. John took a pebble from his pocket. "This is for him," he said, placing the stone at the roots. "His treasure." Sarah smiled, her eyes sparkling. "Beautiful. Now he has a place." "Yes," he nodded. "Thank you for coming up with this." She shrugged, looking at the maple tree. "I wanted you to have something. Alive. A memory that grows." John looked at her, feeling warmth in his chest. She didn't know Liam, but she understood his loss. "You're good, Sarah," he said quietly. "I don't know what I would do without you." "I wish I could live in my garage," she teased, but her voice was soft. "I'm just glad to be around." He nodded, looking at the tree. For the first time in 12 years since Liam, he felt not only pain, but also peace. This was not the end, but the beginning, small, like this maple, but real. They sat for half an hour, talking about little things, about her shift at the hospital, about the motorcycle he was almost finished with, about how her cat chased a mouse around the house. The sun rose higher, warming them, and John noticed how her hand lay next to his, almost touching. "Have you ever thought about starting over?" she asked suddenly, looking at him. "What to start?" He frowned. "Life," she said. "Not just to live, but to enjoy it." He paused, looking at the maple tree. "I thought," he admitted, "but I didn't know how." And now, her voice was cautious, but warm. "Now, maybe," he said, looking at her. "With you next to me, maybe." Sarah smiled, her hand finally touching him, as light as the wind. "I would like to," she said, "so that you are happy." John squeezed her fingers, feeling their warmth. It wasn't a promise, it wasn't a big step, just a moment, but it was theirs. They stood up, collected their tools, and he took one last look at the tree. "Grow up, Liam," he whispered. "I'll come." Sarah took his arm, and they walked to the car. March 2025, Ohio. John was sitting at the table in Sarah's cottage, holding a mug of coffee. It's been a week since they planted the tree for Liam, and something inside him has shifted, not dramatically, but noticeably. He began to notice little things: the way the sun hit the floor, the birds singing outside the window, the way Sarah hummed while preparing breakfast. These were small joys that he had not seen for years. Sarah stood at the stove, frying pancakes. Her ginger cat, Marge, hovered underfoot, hoping for a piece. She glanced at John, smiling. "You're quiet today," she said, turning over the pancake. "What are you thinking about?" "About a tree," he answered, taking a sip of coffee. "I want to check how it is there." "Good idea," she nodded. "We can go after breakfast. I'll take some water in case he needs water." He smiled, a weak smile, but a real one. John looked at her, feeling warmth in his chest. She didn't know Liam, but she accepted his memory as her own. This was more than he could have expected, and he didn't know how to thank her. They ate pancakes with honey, chatting about trifles. Sarah told how her colleague at the hospital spilled juice on his new robe, and John recalled how he once repaired a motorcycle in the rain and dropped the key in a puddle. She laughed. Her laughter was as light as the wind, and he found himself smiling more often than he was used to. "You know," she said, taking a bite, "I never thought before that pancakes could make the morning better. But with you, they can." "It's you who make them better," he answered, looking at her. "I would burn the frying pan." She giggled, poking him in the arm with her fork. "I don't believe it. You are a master at anything you fix." "Not in the kitchen," he objected. "I get lost there." Sarah leaned closer, her eyes sparkling. "Then I'll be your cook, and you are my mechanic. Fair?" "Fair enough," he nodded, feeling how warm her words were. After breakfast, they went to the park. Liam's tree stood where they had left it, a small maple, just above his knee, with new leaves, green and tender. John sat down next to him, checking the ground, a little dry, but strong. Sarah splashed water from her bottle, looking at him. "It's growing," she said, "as you wanted." "Yes," he ran his hand along the trunk. "Thank you for being with me." "I always will," she answered quietly, "if you want." He looked at her standing in the morning light, and for the first time in years he felt that he was not alone. Not just next to someone, but with a person who saw him not a shadow, an unbroken veteran, but John. They walked through the park, talking about the past, but lightly he told how Liam once painted a wall with pencils, and she told how Tom tried to bake a cake and burned down the kitchen. The laughter came on its own, and John noticed that he was not afraid of it. In the afternoon, they returned to her place, and Sarah suggested watching a movie. They chose an old comedy, Home Alone, even though Christmas was long past. They sat down on the sofa, she pulled her legs up, he stretched out his. Marge jumped between them, demanding attention. "She thinks you're her pillow," Sarah said, petting the cat. "Let him think," John answered, scratching Marge behind the ear. "I don't feel sorry." The movie was on, and they laughed at Kevin, at the guy with the pizza, at the ridiculous traps. John found himself looking at Sarah more often than at the screen. Her smile, her laughter, it was simple, but important. He didn't know when it started, but she had become a part of his days, and he didn't want it to go away. "What?" she asked, noticing his gaze. "Nothing," he said, looking away. "It's just, you're beautiful when you laugh." She blushed, but smiled wider. "Thank you, John. You too, when you're not hiding." John woke up at dawn, for the first time in a long time without nightmares. He lay looking at the ceiling and felt something new, not pain, not emptiness, but warmth, weak, but growing. Yesterday with Sarah, the pancakes, the tree, the laughter stayed with him like a ray of sunshine breaking through the clouds. He got up, made coffee, and went out onto the porch. The sky was clear, the sun was rising over the field, turning the grass gold. John sat down on an old chair, holding his mug, and watched the sunrise. Years of pain, loneliness, silence, but now he was beginning to see the light. The phone rang, and he answered, knowing who it was. "Good morning." Sarah's voice was warm, as always. "Didn't you wake me up?" "No," he said, smiling. "Already up." "Okay," she laughed. "I want coffee on the porch. Will you join?" "At your place?" he asked. "Yes," she answered. "Come. Mornings are better together." He nodded, although she didn't see. "I'm on my way." Half an hour later, he was at her cottage. Sarah was waiting on the porch, wearing a sweater and holding 2 mugs of coffee. She handed him one, smiling. "Sit down," she said, nodding to the chair next to her. He sat down, sipping his coffee. The morning was quiet, only the birds were singing somewhere in the distance. Sarah rested her head on his shoulder, her hair smelling of lavender. John froze, but did not pull away. Her warmth was right, necessary. "It's beautiful," she said, looking at the sunrise. "I love mornings like this." "Me too," he replied, surprised that it was true. "With you." She raised her head, looking at him. They sat watching the sunrise and talked about the future for the first time without fear. "You know," she said suddenly, "I thought that after Tom I wouldn't be able to rejoice again. But with you I can." And I. She leaned over and kissed him on the cheek, a light, warm kiss. "We will find happiness," she said, "together." John nodded, looking at her, then at the sunrise. The scars remained, but they no longer bled. He breathed, he lived, and for the first time in years he felt hope. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.